Prior to having children, I always heard that babies change things. That's a fact. They absolutely change things. The expectation of a baby coming changes things before they even get there. You start to think to yourself, I've got to be a little bit more mature than I have ever been. Now, for me, in terms of maturity, has to do with tiny little things getting inside my head and making me angry. That could happen on a trip. I left a certain thing at home. There's an insane amount of traffic. Whatever it is that we're going to is something that I'm not, let's say 100% enthusiastic about going there. We'll say that. If you were to consider that a census was to be taken and all from the southeast were to go to Atlanta, and we're all traveling to Atlanta. My wife is expecting a baby, and she is 9 3/4, 10 1/4 months pregnant. Actually, it's not my wife. We're to be married. And we get there, and we deal with every part of taking a census. I can't imagine that would be any fun. Dealing with some sort of numbers, waiting in lines, having to negotiate all sorts of different obstacles that normally find themselves in Atlanta anyway, much less in this enormous time when everyone is coming to this place. But there's something, when you become a parent, you start to think, okay, I'm going to sacrifice and make myself better. When you start any sort of relationship with another person, you're thinking to yourself, in the best scenario, I'm going to try to make myself better. Now, the image of a baby isn't the only image on Christmas Eve. It's the one we focus on the most. But have you ever wondered why we have communion on Christmas Eve? We always have. Always have. But I've never asked why. In a way, it's a little weird because we're celebrating the coming birth of an infant. And then at the very end of that service, we celebrate something that the adult Jesus did in his very last days. So in a way, it's a little odd. In a way, it's absolutely perfect. Because there's two images, two ideas in those two things. Now you think when the disciples were surrounding Jesus in those last days, they were asking Jesus, as he told them that he would have to make the ultimate sacrifice, who do you think is going to be number one? Who do you think is going to get the seat at your right and at your left? If there were an AP top 12 poll, where would I find myself? Now, he's trying to tell them that he's going to sacrifice himself. He's going to die, and they're asking, what about me? That's the softest, easiest version of the people that are around him. The people on the other side of the wall want to kill him because he has upstaged everything about them. The way in which they forced rules on people that would never allow them in, the way in which Jesus allowed those people in. The way in which they said, you will absolutely not be allowed in this group because of who you are. Jesus said, absolutely, you'll be allowed in this group because of who you are. And so all sorts of painful, very human, spiteful, selfish things going on during the Last Supper. But when you have the image of a baby, when you have Christmas Eve and you have the holidays and everybody gets together and you say, oh, let's just let that stuff go. Let's just be friendly to one another. Let's just be thankful. And if you take those two images, you have the two images of yourself. You've got the positive, proactive self. Think about the times in 2009 that you were positive and you were proactive. You also have the selfish, needy, spiteful self, like those that were outside the doors during Jesus' last days. Now, think about the time in 2009 when you were spiteful, when you were selfish, when you wanted what you wanted, when you wanted it. How long do you have to think about those two categories? If we were to place a percentage on the thoughts that you had about those two categories in this past year, we might really learn something. Now, the important thing is, that was last year. If you were overly positive last year and proactive, and in 2010 you were to say, well, look, I was positive and proactive last year. I'll get to be negative this year. It doesn't matter. If you were overly negative last year and you think, I don't have the option, it's just not in my ability, in my range. Of course it is. Of course you have the ability to be positive and proactive. When we do that, we're contributing. And you think about all the people that contributed in the manger scene.